What's up, beautiful people? Today, I'm going to show you guys how to get better at MMA DFS through reviewing your contest. So take your notebooks out, put your thinking caps on. Class is in session. Okay, so the first thing you got to know about studying previous contests is you got to study the right contest. If you're playing large field contests, do not study the small field contest because they're both pretty different. Small field contests, the optimal lineup or the winning lineup is not as high scoring as the large field contest because there's less contestants in the small field contest, so less lineups, so less likely to hit the nut lineup. And what I mean by nut lineup is the absolute best lineup you could put forward, period. Whereas in the larger field contests, those winning lineups for those contests do get closer to the nut lineup. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, the ownership breakdown is different. Smaller field contests, the chalk is chalkier. I have an example here of last week's fight card. A small field contest of 890 entries. Top three chalk is at 54, 50, and 46. When we go to the large field contest of 59,000 entries, top three chalk is 47, 46, and 41. So none of them even broke the 50% barrier. So just plan according to that. The chalk tends to be chalkier in the small field contests. Last thing I want to say about the difference between small field and large field and why you shouldn't study small field if you're playing large field and vice versa is in the small field, since you have less lineups to compete with, you don't have to get as different. You don't have to be as contrarian as you do when you're playing large field where you have so many more lineups to compete with. Therefore, you're trying to find more ways to get different. Again, moral of this lesson here is playing large field contests, study those. If you're playing small field contests, study those. All right, when you're looking at the actual contest that you did play and you want to understand a little bit more about it, number one, I like to look at the winning lineup. I don't put too much stock into the winning lineup because DFS, specifically MMA DFS, there's so much variance. So don't take the winning lineups as, oh, that's what I have to do. But it is important to understand the principles or the reasons why the winning lineup won in each particular case. So this one I'm talking about UFC 290, where the spreads of the bets, the win odds was very large. Therefore, we had very heavy favorites and very heavy underdogs. So there wasn't many underdogs to choose from. So probability wise, it was smart to use all of your salary. And in this case, if you did watch UFC 290, the Volkanovski versus Pantoja, a lot of upsets happen, or surprising upsets happen. So when you look at the winning lineup here, it was Pantoja, Duplessis, Lawler, Gomez, Volkanovski, and Bo Nickel with 0 duplications. And at first look, it's kind of trippy because the ownership was pretty heavy at 187. The ownership sum, you want to keep it at below 150 as a general rule of thumb. And if you just look at the makeup of the lineup, it's a lot of chalk here. He had the two most chalkiest fighters in Pantoja and Volkanovski at 39 and 50. And the lowest owned fighter he had, I believe, was Gomez at 20%, which is even not that low. Big but, his salary, he only spent $47,800. So he left over $2,000 on the table, which in this card is super contrarian because if you looked at it beforehand, it seemed wise as it was at the time because we didn't know that these underdogs were going to win, to spend all your salary. And if you're going to spend all your salary, there is ways to get different, but you get different elsewhere. In this case, he disregarded ownership and just got different by not spending all of his salary. So the principle here in this particular card, where a lot of people thought, shoot, I got to spend all my salary, he said, no, I'm gonna go for these high owned underdogs. They weren't even low owned underdogs. I'm gonna go with these high owned underdogs, but I'm gonna leave enough salary on the table where that's gonna get me different, and it paid dividends. Now, after looking at the winning lineup, I like to look at the pros. You should all be following pros. A couple of them, Osimo, the dude who runs Stochastic, Blender HD, somebody who I follow closely to learn from this game. Giant Squid, somebody that's just big in the game, and McLovin, also somebody that's big in the game. I like to first look at their exposure real quick. I'll look at it in more detail, but for the sake of time in this video, I will narrow it down. One thing I noticed was Giant Squid. I noticed this is Giant Squid's game in general, and this is a good way to learn like strategy on how to play, because there isn't one correct way to play this. There are correct principles. Giant Squid is a very contrarian player. He takes big stands, and in this fight card, he totally faded Volkanovski, which didn't pay off, but that was his strategy. And I do notice that from Giant Squid, and uh, I'll just look at where people took a stand. Blender seemed to be low on Moreno. I'll look at more of the main event because those are the ones that um, sort of make or break the fight cards here. Pantoja, the underdog, they all seem to be somewhat agreement. They all went with them. Blender and Giant Squid went on him heavy, which did pay off. And then I'll narrow down. I'll zoom in a little more. I was very curious. So when I study pros, I'll go in asking a specific question, curious about a specific thing. I was very curious how these pros were gonna play the main event and co-main event, because we did have 2 5-round fights. So I noticed McLovin was big on Volkanovski. So I like to look at how he played Volkanovski, because we all know it's not all about the players, it's about the way you play them. So I'll look at favorites, Osimo. I'll look at results. DB isn't the greatest with MMA. It seems like they have some sort of bug, because they would look at the lineups and they won't fill it all the way. But he did play 150, so it won't take us for long to see how he played a Volkanovski lineup. He played him with Moreno, who was the other main event favorite. So that's risky already. He only had 4 duplicated here. When you're having below 5 duplications and spending most of your salary, that's a pretty good lineup. So this piques my interest here. Volkanovski, Moreno, that's pretty good. I played a lot of that as well. But when he rounded up the rest of his lineup, he made sure to play a couple at 20 and below. So he played Lawler, Hooker, and Kirk. So that made up for the ownership. He stuck at around 150, and Tatsu Taira at 23%. Goes to show you that you can play high-owned players. You just the way you combine them with the rest of your lineup. Last thing I want to touch on with this is a good indication of a good lineup is, number one, a low duplications. I like to shoot below 5 duplications. And the salary. The salary is a reflection of win percentage. And this card, it wasn't, because there was upsets, but generally, the higher they cost, the more win percentage you have. The win percentage is in your favor. So when you see a lineup that's close to the 50K cap and it's low duplicated, that's generally an indication of a well-built lineup. Finally, the last thing I like to look at is to look at my own lineups. This is a Excel program I have from Blender HD. He has the theory of DFS, which I'll link to his video. Highly recommend it. If you buy the course, you do get these tools that I like to look at. This one in particular, I like to use this over Results DB in my case, because looking at Results DB, it doesn't have all my players that I played. So quick look, one thing I like to look at, how many duplications I had. I played pretty well. 7 was the highest, which isn't that bad. If it was like at 20 or so, then that would be something I like to look at. So I felt like I played this card well, considering my strategy. All my lineups, I used most of my salary. I just got different by the combination of the chalk players with less chalky player. For example, the Volkanovski Moreno, I played a lot of those two, but I rounded it out with Whitaker, Ross, and Pacino. Whitaker I was big on because I believed he was going to win. That was a major upset, which really goofed up a lot of my lineups, but Whitaker was really low owned at 16%. And considering how much of a favorite he was, I was going to go with him all day. Unfortunately, it didn't come out that way. That just shows you the variance in MMA DFS. You could have a solid strategy, but the variance won't go your way. But just stick to your strategy. Know why you're doing certain things, and eventually the variance will go in your favor. So before I finish my contest review, I like to take a lesson from it, whether it's small or big, and if I'd like to eventually implement it into my personal strategy. In this case, this lesson, where I'm at right now, I like to play more low variance. So I wouldn't implement this strategy, at least from now, but now I know that this is possible, is when there's a fight card where there's heavy favorites and it's recommended to spend most of your salary, if not all of your salary. A great way to get different is to not spend your salary, not even close to all of your salary, and bank on these big underdogs winning, which, like I said, is possible, like we saw this past weekend. But it's not the way I like to play, because that sort of play increases your variance. You won't hit often, but when you do, you'll hit big. That's not my personal style of play. I know there are people who do play like that, and that's a strategy to go about. If you are that type of player who likes to increase the variance, do that. When there's a fight card with heavy favorites, don't spend all of your salary. Keep that ownership. Then the ownership of the particular players won't matter as much as we saw in this fight card. I am done.